At 4:15, some 200 nautical miles off the coast near La Guaira, something extraordinary happened. The AIS signal of the cargo ship Sparta 4 suddenly went dark. A 500-foot vessel reportedly carrying a missile system and equipment worth around $1 billion had disappeared right under the watch of U.S. Southern Command. Russia appeared to be taking a major gamble, shutting off the ship's transponder to blend in with hundreds of fishing boats in hopes of slipping through the surveillance net and quietly reaching a Venezuelan port. Within moments, Washington moved to respond. U.S. commanders understood the stakes immediately. If the ship reached port, Venezuela's coastline could soon host missile systems capable of putting much of the Caribbean under pressure. As the USS Arleigh Burke increased speed and moved closer to the area, Venezuela reacted just as fast. Two Su-30 Mk-2 fighters launched from El Libertador Air Base, armed with the KH-31 Krypton, a supersonic anti-ship missile that can fly faster than Mach 3. Then came the first surprise. As the Venezuelan fighters headed out over the sea, their radar signatures suddenly disappeared from American screens. Inside the Combat Information Center, tension rose instantly. U.S. officers watched their displays, distorted by the terrain of the Cordillera de la Costa mountain range, and faced an uncomfortable question. Had the enemy pulled back, or had they slipped into a blind zone beyond radar coverage? The answer came quickly, and it was far more dangerous than anyone hoped. Using the 2,000-meter peaks as cover, the Su-30S suddenly popped up from behind the mountains in a steep vertical climb. For only a few seconds, they switched on their radar at full power, lit up the USS Arleigh Burke, and dropped back into the valleys before American defenses could properly react. It was a textbook ambush. The mountain range had become a natural shield, giving Venezuela a clever and risky advantage. That created a serious problem for the American captain. If he activated the ship's high-power radar to search for the hidden aircraft, those emissions could act like a beacon for incoming KH-31 missiles. But staying silent meant losing visibility on Sparta 4, which was still moving in the shadows. It was a genuine tactical dilemma. The U.S. response was measured. The captain ordered emissions control, shutting down radar and keeping the ship electronically silent. Then he turned to an asset flying far above the mountains, where terrain could no longer block the picture. The MQ-4C Triton reconnaissance drone. Operating above 50,000 feet, the Triton became the fleet's eyes in the sky. Through encrypted data links, it fed targeting and tracking information directly to the USS Arleigh Burke. Its immediate task was simple but critical. Keep Sparta 4 under watch and prevent it from taking advantage of the fleet's radar silence. But the problem did not stop with the Su-30CS. To protect Sparta 4 on its final approach, Venezuela also deployed S-300VM Ante, 2,500 air defense systems along the coast using a hit-and-move method. The radar vehicles shifted positions constantly, activating their systems only briefly to track USP-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft before shutting down and disappearing into forested terrain. The pressure on the American crews was immense. The P-8 knew it was being targeted, but because the enemy radars were switching off and relocating so quickly, there was not enough time to build an accurate firing solution for anti-radiation missiles. Venezuela may have believed this guerrilla-style tactic could not be beaten. That assumption proved costly. From a carrier operating off Puerto Rico, EA-18G Growlers from VAQ-13 were rushed into the fight. Flying at around 30,000 feet, they released 4 MALD decoys. Using signature enhancement technology, these small drones created the radar image of a four-ship formation of F/A-18 Super Hornets charging in for an attack. The deception worked perfectly. Convinced that a U.S. strike was underway, the S-300 crews reacted on instinct. They powered up their 9S-32 engagement radar and kept it transmitting long enough to lock onto the false targets. That decision exposed them. The continuous radar emissions gave the P-8 operating farther out exactly what it needed. A full electronic signature and precise coordinates for each launcher. In one move, Venezuela's coastal air defense network was effectively mapped and tactically neutralized. With the coastal threat weakened, the U.S. returned its full attention to Sparta 4. On the surface, the race had reached its decisive stage. The ship was now only 14 nautical miles from the coast, just 2 nautical miles away from the 12 nautical mile line marking Venezuelan territorial waters. At its current speed, it needed only about 10 more minutes. Once it crossed that line, international law would make direct intervention far more difficult. Why was this ship causing so much alarm? According to U.S. intelligence, hidden among hundreds of ordinary containers might be Club K missile systems. That is what made Sparta 4 so dangerous. Externally, Club K looks like a standard 40-foot shipping container, something that could sit unnoticed on a truck, rail car, or dockyard. Inside, however, it can conceal cruise missiles with serious reach. If such a system made it ashore, it could be positioned almost anywhere and still threaten major regional targets. From Washington's point of view, allowing that cargo to arrive was not an option. Still, there was a legal and political problem. The USS Arleigh Burke was a warship, and stopping a civilian commercial vessel by force could be interpreted as a major escalation. So the US chose a more careful approach. The destroyer stayed over the horizon with its SM-6 missiles ready, while the U.S. Coast Guard cutter James moved to the front. That allowed the operation to be framed not as a military strike, but as a maritime safety and anti-smuggling inspection. Over international radio, the Coast Guard ordered Sparta 4 to slow down and prepare for boarding, citing concerns about fire and explosion safety. The Russian captain ignored every word. Instead of slowing, Sparta 4 pushed ahead at its top speed of 18 knots. The calculation was obvious. The Americans would hesitate to escalate, and every minute brought the ship closer to legal protection. Then the situation tightened again. Venezuela made it clear it would not tolerate the inspection. 2 Lupo-class warships of the Venezuelan Navy emerged from the fog and moved to shield the cargo ship. Though old, they still carried powerful 127mm OTO Melara naval guns, heavier than those on the Coast Guard cutter. They crossed the cutter's bow, trained their weapons, and forced the U.S. ship into a sharp maneuver to avoid collision. Now the U.S. Coast Guard vessel was badly outmatched in visible firepower. Sparta 4 continued forward, ignoring warnings and closing on territorial waters. For a moment, it looked as though the United States might lose the game. Then everything changed with one sound. From somewhere very close beneath the surface came the unmistakable ping of active sonar. Reports placed it off the Venezuelan ship's port side, only about 800 meters away. The calm water erupted. A towering plume of white spray shot upward, and from below emerged a massive black shape. The USS Washington, a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine. A 115-meter submarine powered by an S-9G nuclear reactor had surfaced right beside the aging Venezuelan escorts. The message did not need to be spoken aloud. The Americans had been underneath them for hours. If this had been a real engagement, the Venezuelan ships would have been in grave danger long before they even realized they were being tracked. In an instant, the balance of power flipped. What had looked like a confident escort force now appeared exposed and vulnerable. With drones overhead, Coast Guard ships ahead, destroyers farther back, and a nuclear submarine beneath them, the Venezuelan Navy suddenly found itself boxed in from every direction. That pressure began to show. But high above, one Venezuelan Su-30 pilot still refused to let the moment go. That decision nearly made the crisis even worse. In a final act of defiance, the fighter climbed from behind the mountains, activated its fire control radar, and locked directly onto the USS Arleigh Burke. The pilot appeared to be betting that the U.S. would not respond forcefully in international airspace. This time, the response was immediate. The Arleigh Burke powered up its AN/SPY-1 radar at full strength, directing energy straight at the lead Su-30 and signaling readiness to fire an SM-6. At the same moment, an EA-18G Growler began electronic attack using its jamming system. The result was overwhelming. The Su-30 systems reportedly began to fail under the pressure. Displays flickered, radar picture collapsed, audio channels filled with harsh electronic noise. Facing a wall of technology he could not break through, the pilot dropped the lock, turned hard, and dove back into the valley. The air threat had been pushed aside. Now only one piece remained on the board, Sparta 4 itself. From 50,000 feet, the MQ-4C Triton delivered the final move. According to the scenario, it identified container 894 as the location of the concealed Club K system and transmitted high-resolution thermal imagery over international emergency channels together with a stark warning. The message was direct. Dangerous military-grade explosives had been detected, and if the ship continued another nautical mile, action could be taken in the name of maritime safety. That was the turning point. The Russian captain tried one last escape route, requesting permission to divert to Havana for technical repairs. The idea was transparent. Seek temporary shelter with an ally, let the pressure cool, and look for another opportunity to move the cargo later. But that option closed almost immediately. Washington reportedly delivered an urgent diplomatic warning that any country accepting a ship carrying offensive missile systems would be treated as taking a directly hostile step and could face a sweeping naval response. Cuba, unwilling to absorb that level of risk for cargo that was not its own, denied Sparta 4 permission to dock. With no port available and no safe path forward, the end came quickly. The USS Arleigh Burke issued its final message. Sparta 4 would not be allowed into any regional port and would be escorted back out beyond the exclusive economic zone. At that point, the Russian captain had little choice left. The billion-dollar ship turned away and began the long trip back across the Atlantic. The Caribbean incident ended without open combat, yet its impact was larger than many direct confrontations. By forcing Sparta 4 to turn back, the United States did more than stop one shipment. It sent a broader message about control, access, and influence in a region where every move is watched closely. The lesson for everyone involved was clear. In high-stakes power contests, the side that dominates the board often wins long before anyone pulls the trigger.